Greetings summoners, and welcome back to another ProGuides Wild Rift video. My name is Terry, and today we have for you our high ELO tier list for patch 2.4b. There were some game-changing updates, so this tier list should help you figure out who's strong and who's not. But keep in mind, when ranking these champions, we're assuming that players have a firm understanding of the specific champion's mechanics, alongside game knowledge necessary to properly utilize the pick. This list is for ranks Emerald and higher. We have a separate low ELO tier list for ranks below Emerald. Our first pick of the day is Tryndamere for the Baron lane. Since Solari Chargeblade received some substantial, much-deserved nerfs, Tryndamere is also feeling the brunt of the item balance. He loves to build crit, since the majority of his damage comes from his auto attacks. The nerf resulted in him dropping down from previous A tier to B tier. In essence, he's still a viable pick, but doesn't fit into every team composition. The sword-wielding Baron laner excels when played against squishies with little crowd control to peel him off, but he falls off when facing bruisers and tanks that can keep him still and prevent him from running rampant around the map. If you love to play the champion, go ahead and keep practicing him, but keep in mind that there are simply stronger picks to choose from. The second pick for the Baron lane is Malphite in the B tier, having jumped up a step from the previous patch. He didn't receive any direct buffs to his kit, but is simply becoming more relevant thanks to the evolving meta. Depending on team composition, Malphite can build either full AP or full tank. Regardless of the build, as long as the rock can hit his ultimate, the pick is fantastic for teamfights. For a full AP build, definitely consider taking Luden's Echo, since it provides fantastic splash damage on your abilities. If you're looking to spam your ultimate, consider buying Awakened Soul Stealer as well. Both of these items were buffed, and therefore his overall damage potential was increased. Before we move on to the last Baron pick of the day, we have our question of the day. What's the most controversial champion that you play? Some picks just make your teammates angry, even if they work perfectly fine. Personally, I love playing Ashe support, but I get flamed all the time for playing it. I swear, it works when built and played correctly. Be sure to leave your answers down in the comments below. The last Baron lane champion for today is Gragas, who dropped from the OP tier to the S tier in patch 2.4b. After being super strong since Wild Rift's initial release of the open beta, he's finally being nerfed. His numbers on his base armor were decreased, and slow on his barrel roll were decreased as well. In addition, Drunken Anger cooldown was increased. These changes create more windows of opportunity to outplay the Fat Drunk, allowing enemy Baron laners to trade more effectively with him without being completely oppressed by his overwhelming crowd control and high damage numbers. We expect him to still remain quite strong, just not as powerful as he once was. For those of you interested in becoming a more active part of our community, join our ProGuides Wild Rift Discord. We hold regular giveaways and community events. So what are you waiting for? Here is the full Baron lane tier list. The first pick up for the jungle is Xin Zhao in our A tier picks for this list. He receives some direct nerfs to his kit, decreasing his base health and defense. When the nerfs are compounded together, this results in him becoming significantly more fragile, thereby increasing the risk carried with the pick. He still deals fantastic damage, especially during the early stages of the game. Xin Zhao's abilities are incredibly hard to deal with, since the crowd control and DPS on his abilities are no joke. He's definitely still viable. Just make sure to be confident in your engages and understand what fights you win and which ones will just result in your death. The second jungle up is Riven in the S tier picks for this list. She's not the easiest champion to play, but for those of you who understand how to utilize her insane mobility and can weave her intricate combos with great efficiency, the Riven jungle pick is fantastic. During the early stages of the game, abuse her first ability with auto attack reset to burst down jungle camps. Then start ganking lanes. She jumps and runs really fast, and since she has a knockup and stun built into her kit, escaping the Broken Blade becomes a trying task. For those of you looking to play a mechanically intense champion, try Riven out. The final jungle pick for this list is Khazix, who has fallen from the OP plus down to the OP tier. In other words, he's still pretty broken despite the nerfs he received in patch 2.4b. Since his healing on Void Spikes was reduced alongside the damage on Taste Their Fear, Khazix shouldn't be as safe of a pick as he once was. When ganking, the Predator should have less HP than he used to, creating bigger openings for his enemies to effectively fight back. Considering the meta is still full of marksmen bleeding into other roles, albeit less than before, Khazix should still have a blast when fighting against squishy targets. He's one of the greatest assassins in the game when it comes to cleaning up low HP enemies. If you want to learn how to play Khazix, check out our ProView Khazix breakdown. Here is the full jungle tier list. Our first mid lane champion up is Akshan in the S tier. He just got buffed 2 patches in a row, with the most recent buffs drastically increasing his viability as a crit marksman. Heroic Swing and Cup Uppance both now scale with crit, which should allow Akshan to finally deal some substantial damage to his enemies. The biggest issue with the champion was that he only really tickled with his auto attacks and skills, but since crit itemizations are now optimized for Akshan, he should find a much easier time performing his essential role as a damage dealer. Despite having a respawn mechanic in his kit, the champion itself isn't broken. If Riot decides to buff him again, he might become OP, but until then, he's sitting comfortably in the S tier for this list. The second mid lane champion is Katarina, who has dropped down to the S tier. Her base health was reduced from 650 to 570, which is a whopping 80 health difference. This vastly decreases her survivability in the early game, creating bigger opportunities for her enemies to kill the squishy assassin, and therefore prevent her from snowballing the game from early on. In addition, the nerfs to Haunting Guys should definitely affect her, as she relied on the magic penetration from the item to create some absolutely abysmal play conditions. Katarina isn't necessarily overpowered anymore, but she should still be quite strong when wielded by players who understand how to maximize her combos and damage. Auriel Soul is the last champion for the mid lane, sitting as the only C tier pick for the mid lane. He's definitely not in the greatest state since there are so many other champions that perform his essential job much better. If he manages to do so effectively, Auriel Soul scales rather well, and when utilized by a skilled player, can carry teamfights with his area of effect damage. But the issue is that if Soul gets caught out, or his ganks don't go the way he intended, the pick falls off. Champions like Twisted Fate and Ziggs can impact other lanes more prudently since TF can gauge the situation first before teleporting, and Ziggs can just throw out his ultimate from across the map. Auriel Soul, on the other hand, needs to throw his entire fragile body in the middle of a teamfight, creating a high-risk scenario. Unless you're absolutely confident in your map awareness and Auriel Soul mechanics, we highly recommend staying away from the Galaxy Dragon. Here is the full mid lane tier list. Our first ADC pick for today is Xayah in the OP Plus tier. She's pretty overtuned at the moment, since her itemization options synergize phenomenally well with her abilities. The key to maximizing the pick is to keep track of your feathers while positioning aggressively to deal as much damage as possible. But you have to keep a close eye on all key threats on the enemy team. If they get dangerously close to you, simply bring in your feathers and root them in place. Or you can use your ultimate to grant yourself temporary invulnerability and position to safety. She's not the easiest champion to master, but for those of you who have the game knowledge and mechanical prowess to maneuver her effectively, she's an absolute monster in patch 2.4b. Kaisa is the second ADC up in the OP picks for this list. By prioritizing her first ability upgrade, the Void Seeker's damage is incredibly high from pretty early on in the game. She doesn't make use of all the newer itemizations available for AD carries, but she really doesn't need to. After all, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Actually, in this case, she's kinda broken in a positive way, so I guess that phrase doesn't really apply here. But anyway, nothing much regarding Kaisa has changed. She's still the same teamfight hyper carry that she was months ago. The last ADC up is Jhin, who is in the C tier. He's really not that strong, since he doesn't have any escapes or tools to effectively handle champions that love to jump on squishy marksmen. That doesn't mean Jhin is absolutely garbage, since those who are confident in hitting his difficult skill shots will still be able to find success. But seeing as how his constant stream of damage is lacking, there are simply more versatile picks that perform his job better. Until he receives some buffs, don't expect Jhin to be prominent in the current meta. Here is the full ADC tier list. For supports, we have Senna up first in the S tier for this list. She's not as strong as she once was, since Frozen Mallet was removed from the game, RIP. If she is given the opportunity to harass her lane opponents and farm souls, Senna can easily take over the game. Her damage numbers as a support simply aren't balanced, oftentimes providing more DPS than some AD carries. During teamfights, her damage output and healing carry the game. The issue with the pick is that if a champion like Leona closes in on her, she becomes a sitting duck. That one exploitable weakness is easily abused, especially in the laning phase. Locking her down renders her essentially useless, since the marksman support has a body like glass and has little to no tools to properly handle a hard engage. The next support is Nami, who is in the S tier as well. She's surprisingly powerful with a strong laning phase and even stronger mid to late game. If you need more crowd control, pick Nami. If you need more sustain on your team, pick Nami. If your team needs more damage amplification, pick Nami. She's super versatile, and the only real job she can't perform is frontline tank. The last pick for today is Lulu. She's officially in the S tier for this list, pushing her out of the underrated picks. Lulu excels at teamfights, since her abilities can be utilized to both buff her allies and deny the enemy their plays. The pick doesn't deal much damage on her own, especially when built as a proper support, but her job isn't to deal damage. Instead, she increases the DPS of her allies, making her the perfect pick when the rest of your team feels like locking in damage carries. Here is the full support tier list. Keep in mind, this video is for the high ELO, covering ranked play, Emerald, and higher. If you want a more beginner-friendly list, check out our low ELO tier list that released earlier this week. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for everything Wild Rift. Before you go, don't forget to address the question of the day in the comments down below. And until next time, stay safe and have fun.